All right, here we go. We're over here at Red Barn Racing. We are visiting the 67, which as you can see has no engine in it. That's what happens when you have a new engine ready to go in. Things you learned today on Jay's 2 Cents. When you remove things and put new things in, it's called replacement. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. So here's what we got going on today. Removing the engine really shows you just how filthy and nasty and grimy and powder coat, flaky everything is under there, which really sucks because now I'm at this crossroads of, do I change the subframe? Do we pull it all the way out and send it out for media blasting and powder coating? Or do I just Scotch Brite it up, rattle can it back to black so it's at least the same color of black and not brown, black, gray, whatever other red color of rust that there is under there. And then later on when we do the body work, address it. I don't really want to delay the project by sending this out for media blasting because I'm not impatient. I'm really torn on this whole idea of going that level of detail with this build. I know that seems kind of counterintuitive based on the engine build you guys saw, but I care about the mechanical capability of the car more so than I care about how clean is the engine bay. You can see it's not looking too good. I mean, look, we've got a lot of this stuff going on. It's surface rust. It's not a big problem. It's not eating away the steel. Remember, this is a 53, almost 54-year-old car. We've got nastiness going on right there. The amount of extra work it will take to get this subframe out, sent off, and wait for all that delays then what Mike's able to do in his spare time, because this is a long-term build, so it kind of gets worked on when there's downtime, can potentially push this project back farther. It means it takes up a spot in his shop longer, and I'm not sure what I want to do with that. And we got a lot of other stuff we can do, like we've got to fix this wiring. This wiring's awful. I've got a whole new harness for the car. We've got fuel lines that can be run up to where the subframe would be anyway, because the fuel lines would come in along the top of the subframe right there. I need to redo the brake lines now that I have access to it, because the brake lines that I did, although they don't look the prettiest, they function. It's really hard to do a full brake line reline job when you have an engine and transmission in the car. So now that I have full access to it, I could do it. But if there was a thought of pulling the subframe out, then that is pointless because I'd have to redo the lines again anyway. So as you can see, it just turns into kind of a snowball effect. It means all the suspension we already did would have to come back off. Oh, the suspension's easy, but still, it would have to come off. And it looks like I hit my subframe with the Scotch Brite. Way to go, Jay. Or not my subframe, but the sway bar. This is one of those things where I feel like I need to do a video about things I've learned owning a Classic for 6 months. And I feel like I severely underestimated some of the work that's going to be involved. But at the same time, that's kind of one of the reasons why I got it, so I don't know. Anyway, as you can see, the ZZ6 is out. We'll be finding a new home for this guy. It's a good motor. Doesn't have very many miles on it. Just needs a new distributor cap because it was fouling and falling apart. We've got a lot of the old crud off of there. We did some Brillo padding. Look at how much of the paint came off right there. So anywhere the paint wants to lift is where I basically was scraping it off. I used air pressure. Got a lot of this off. Blowing it all over the shop too, but you can just see like in the tunnel right there, there's orange or yellow paint still showing through from the old paint job. But we're gonna end up doing a spray can job on this, which is, I know it's gonna make some people cringe, but this, to be done right, needs to be fully disassembled and sent off to media blasting to get this back down to bare metal and powder coated. And then it will look, I think, equally as weird having this perfectly clean subframe and then an ugly firewall and then ugly fender liners and then ugly radiator support. So I think we're going to end up just going the route of making it look as nice under the engine here as we could, because we can still change the fender liners, which will look nice at that point. And then we're going to probably end up maybe spraying the firewall at some point, maybe not. Most of it's not visible with the motor in. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that you find as you tear into an older car. In fact, Mike was telling me as he was pulling the motor off, even the serpentine setup on the front over here, I don't think he had 2 matching bolts for all of it, which is really kind of funny because this is all the stuff that came off the front of the engine. So here's a serpentine setup. There's the AC compressor right there. We won't be reusing that. We have a different one because that won't work with the LS7. Water pump, distributor was falling apart, like I said. Alternator, you have your, obviously that's your cam or your crank driven fuel pump right there, which since we're going EFI, we don't need that. There's the little itty bitty carburetor. Look at this. Look how teeny. It's so small. Anyway, yeah, so we don't need any of that anymore, but all the bolts holding these to the serpentine parts to the block were like wrong. There was like a mixture of metric bolts, and there was a mixture of standard bolts, and then there was bolts that were, I think he said that there was like a starter bolt holding the motor mount, or the motor to the motor mount. It's like, it was just all kinds of wrong. So that's one of the reasons why I have the car over here at Red Barn Racing, because he knows this stuff and he can teach me as we go and still get it done in a timely manner. Otherwise, this car would probably take me forever, as in never get done if I had to go to that level of tearing it apart and stuff. But I think this might be a good time to sort of go into some of the things I've learned while owning a classic. So let's kind of get real here for a sec. No matter how much you think the person put time, effort, and money into the car, they're gonna try and make you think that they did. They are going to try to cover up every potential problem that exists on the car. Now that's not to say all used classics are a ripoff or a waste of money. It's just, it's probably more often than not that you're gonna find someone that's not gonna be necessarily forthcoming with any problems that exist with the car, because they want to sell the car. And these are all private party sales, not companies. So there's no buyer's remorse, there's no returns, there's no refunds, there's no warranty. It's just, thank God, this car is no longer my problem, it's his problem now. And then you get like this, where you dig into it and you find the transmission was built wrong, you find that the engine was mounted wrong. The irony is the engine was actually installed by a Chevy dealer. I have the receipt for that. I'm not gonna say which Chevy dealer it is, but it's a pretty good reason why you should go to somebody who knows what they're doing, like a third-party shop like this that specializes in these types of builds, and not just the dealer, because I guarantee you the tech wasn't gonna make any money on that job, so they really didn't put any love or care into it. Not to mention, to do it right, there's quite a bit of customization and custom parts you need to get any modern engine to fit in a classic correctly without getting like what you saw, all the paint chipped off the tunnel because of the fact that the transmission was resting against the tunnel, which explained a lot of clunking, thunking under the car that I just could not track down and figure out what was going on. I also severely underestimated how quickly you can, I guess, fall into the trap of, wow, this car is super clean, there's not a whole lot I need to do to it. Because as you can see, based on what I'm showing you with the subframe alone in the front of the car, is that it's always going to be worse than you think, unless the buyer has like a complete catalog of photos of a restoration project that they did on the car. And then you can see at least the work that was done through progress photos, which is one of the reasons why I'm kind of documenting this car as we go through it, because eventually it will be to that point to where it's fully restored. It's just right now I'm making it a fun car that still has its cosmetic issues. But if you find a car that's got that level of documentation on a restoration, it's gonna cost you. And that person will probably be able to answer any questions that you have regarding the vehicle, which will always put you at ease when it comes to buying something like that. The other thing I highly underestimated is just how quickly and how expensive the project can rack up. For instance, since I've had the car, I alone have spent, I'm not gonna say an amount, my wife might be watching this video. I will tell you that I have changed the rear end to a Mosier unit. I have gone Wilwood brakes all around. I have gone with all new suspension all around, all new mounts, all new hardware, new Wilwood master cylinder, new slave cylinder, new brake lines. The brake lines are, well, they're technically new. It's new materials. I bent them. They're not the greatest, but they work. And that is just what's underneath the car. That doesn't include the motor and the transmission, which, like I said earlier, I ordered a transmission from RPM Transmissions. If you guys understand drag racing and transmissions, you'll know that that was definitely a high tier purchase, because if I'm gonna put something in this car, I'm gonna make sure that it is the best that I can afford to put in it. That way I'm not doubling up on work later by having to also build another transmission because we blew it up. The 4L65 that RPM Transmissions built, the Stage 6, is, yeah, it's tough. And anyone that is like, oh, why would you go with a 4L65? Oh, RPM Transmission's okay. I've had a lot of people actually backtrack on their 4L60 sucks. Oh, it's from RPM? Okay, yeah, you're good. So there is that. Oh, that also doesn't include the wheels that I put on. I mean, there's wheels and tires that aren't even my forever wheel, if you will. It's just something I could get on the car for now that fit. It got the torque thrust off. It allowed me to fit a bigger tire, which we're gonna need with the horsepower. And it just goes on and on and on from there. I've also purchased a complete new wiring harness for the car, for the body harness, I should say. It's got for all the lights and the starter and the just any of the stuff that goes in the cab, because this harness has been hacked up. That's probably the #1 problem that you'll find, I think. LJ, would you agree? Buying a classic, the #1 thing you're probably gonna find is wiring problems?
Yeah.
Because even if it isn't hacked up, it's old and rotted and hard and brittle.
Yeah, things break, things crack.
Yeah.
Wires touch together, short themselves out together. It's always a killer when it comes to older, just classic vehicles.
Or in my instance, I'm using butt connectors, like twist connectors like you'd find in a home electrical system, holding together headlight wires for my car. What am I hearing? Why does it sound like a cam? Sorry, I'm easily distracted by sounds. Yeah, so this car, there's a lot of problems with the wiring. So look at that right there. Yeah, I actually did that because one of the problems I found is this blinker wasn't working because whoever replaced the connector, because the connector was replaced at some point, inverted the polarity on it. So an incandescent light will still light with an incorrect polarity. It just doesn't, it doesn't go bright, and not to mention it won't last very long that way, but you will still get some light out of it. So I had to switch that, and that's one of the reasons why I led to just, you know what, I'm buying a complete new harness for this car. It was about 700 bucks, which I think when you compare to what wiring and ECMs and BCMs and TCMs and all that can cost in a modern car is actually not that bad. The nice thing about old cars is if you leave it carbureted and such and don't go EFI like I did, which remember we went with Holley EFI, so at least we went with a proven, built company that has literally, I don't know how many like championships and stuff under their belt in terms of, you know, street car, race car, etc. If you stuck with like just a basic carburetor engine, which you just need the standard, you know, you got spark, you got fuel, you got compression, it's gonna burn, then there's not that many wires in the car, and it's very primitive. 12-volt battery, ground, wires, that's it. It's super simple. It's the modern cars that have all the sensors and all the computers and the harnesses leading to harnesses and such. Like, I didn't even know this till I got into my ZL1 when I first bought it. Each control arm has a sensor hooked up to it that's got an arm that pivots with the arm. So the computer knows exactly how much the car is leaning. So it knows how much the car is actually leaning to the side, and it has to do with, Mike's looking at me like, damn YouTubers making videos in my shop. So this is the man, you guys have seen him in my videos. I was kind of talking about things I've learned owning a classic for the last 6 months. Mistakes I've made, some naive things I thought, versus what I'm learning as we dig into this car. So I already showed them how like none of the bolts that came off the Serpentine were right, the motor mount bolts weren't right, and this is because of Mickey Mouse stuff people have done. And no matter how much someone might try and convince you, oh yeah, we did this, oh it was done by a reputable shop or whatever, unless there's documentation of like photos of it being done and stuff, because I have documentation on this car, but that didn't mean the work was done right. You're probably buying somebody else's headache that's Mickey Mouse together.
Yeah, like somebody literally dug through the bolts bin and got all the bolts for this car out of like a box somewhere.
So I've got a big box of bolts that came out from all the stuff I did under the car before I dropped it off to you, and I noticed there's a collection in the trunk of all the stuff you took off here. It looks like mine. There's no two matching bolts.
Yeah, like the passenger side bolt was metric, the driver's side bolt was an ARP standard.
One of the first, I don't want to say arguments, but I called Mike and I was like, what size is this bolt? Nothing of mine's fitting it. He's like, no, it's 9/16 or whatever. I'm like, no, it's metric. He's like, no, it's an American car, it's standard.
Yeah.
Now you understand why I was going, no, it was metric, because this car literally is like a trip around the world in terms of the way the measurements and stuff are.
Yeah.
So yeah, although we're going Holley EFI, it's it's a very simplified system versus what comes from like OEM. Like we were kind of comparing Holley EFI to all the BCMs and TCMs and ECMs in my modern car, how it's still going to be very friendly in terms of figuring out and getting tuned. But I am adding some complication back to this versus like your car, which is like, it's got fuel, it's got sparks, it's got ignition, it's going to run. Yeah, it's one of those things, we had a lot of discussion about whether or not I should go with Holley or not. But after Holley reached out and I saw the reliability that we could still have without it being overly complicated, make me comfortable with it. But man, we found out that the car's trip down here was literally its last safe trip because when he took the distributor cap off, it fell apart.
Yeah.
And the coil was burned and and it still beat a 435i on the highway on the way down here though. So a few weeks have gone by actually since the ending of that other video, which technically is not an ending now. If you might have noticed, we did more stuff. Yeah, we took the whole front off the car. Figuring out how much of this we can clean up, make look nice, get the firewall cleaned up, repaint the firewall, new inner fenders and all that stuff, because we're trying to make the engine bay area look as nice as we possibly can before doing any sort of like body work and stuff. So here's the front clip of the car. Literally, you can take the fenders and the front off all in one piece. There's the hood. Look at that. There's the hood. Oh, watch it, Nick. This is how they put front ends on like restaurants and shit and storefronts and stuff, and they just buy the sheet metal and make it look cool. But anyway, yeah, so I'm probably gonna be changing the front suspension too. Still not happy with the Hotchkiss stuff. They reached out to me and said they'd reach out to me again to make some of this shit right that was wrong, and all the way up to the owner, and then he never followed up, and terrible customer service. So I have to just go ahead and say that we're going to be probably pulling the front Hotchkiss stuff off for some QA1 coilover setups. Better stuff anyway, and while it's all apart like this, all the suspension is coming off because we're going to be powder coating, media blasting and powder coating the subframe, making that look nice, because with all the work and that beautiful engine that we built, you can't put it in there with it looking like this. Like this is just not, no, that's not going to work. And then that firewall, oh my God. And then some of the, shut up phone, I'm busy. And then this is some of the rust we uncovered right here. It's not great, but it's not as bad as it could be. There is a hole I'm kind of, you know what though? Metal right under there. So this needs to be fixed and patched. And once you start media blasting that, who knows what you're gonna find, but we know there's gonna be some rust problems there. We know there's gonna be some rust problems under here under the rockers. There's definitely rust back here. You can kind of, I don't know what shows up on camera, it's all rough right there. The floor pan, which I showed you guys before, it's got rust in there. Showed you guys that on social media. So now's the time to get all that stuff fixed as much as possible. We were actually debating whether or not we're gonna talk to the body shop folks that worked on his car, which I'm not showing you guys because he's got an unveiling coming probably pretty soon of how that turned out. Same guys that did Lethal Camaro's car. Good work, but it changes the whole timeline of things, so I'm torn on that. But I think we need to at least talk to them and see how they feel about it. But again,
how real is it?
How real is it? And I know the answer is gonna be, who knows what the fuck is underneath that paint? And that's the unknown variable that makes it either this is not gonna take that long, or this is gonna take 2 times longer than we expected, and 2 times more money, or more. Anyway, so yeah, I just figured I'd tack this on to the end of the other video because I came down here to do brake lines, and I'm glad I didn't do them now because they're all gonna come out anyway. But anyway, all right guys, I'm tired, time to go. Nick helped.
Yay.
Moral support mostly, and then of course Mike giving all his expertise as always. All right guys, thanks for watching, we'll see you in the next one.